Welcome to Pain with a Purpose, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of resilience, redemption, and purpose. I'm your host, Chris Woods, and each week we will sit down with guests who have faced challenges with substance abuse, mental health, and recovery. But we're not just dwelling on the past. Instead, we'll explore what keeps them driven towards a purposeful life. Join us as we navigate the journey from pain to a purpose. So yeah, with that, welcome back to Pain with a Purpose, Season 2, Episode 17, I believe.
Let's go.
With David Millar.
Yeah.
David
Millar.
David Millar.
Yeah.
Like Peter Millar.
Yeah.
Is that your uncle?
People, no.
It'd be a lot cooler if it was.
A lot of people miss the A, so.
Yeah, when I looked it up, I was like, Millar.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, thank you for making the trip. I know that you're not local by any means. So we're in obviously like King of Prussia right now. And,
Right.
You came all the way from Hershey,
Pennsylvania, where I go to school.
Okay.
And currently live. So.
Do you mind the drive? Or like how often do you make the trip like from like Hershey back home?
This is like the halfway point for halfway back home. And I honestly, like, we were supposed to do this like a couple weeks ago, and I was going to be like, all right, I'll drive here and then I'll just go home after because I haven't been home in a while. But then like I was busy, like we ended up pushing it back and I was going to do the same thing, but I have like a big exam on Friday. So now I'm like, I'm just going back to Hershey after this.
Oh, so you're not even going back home?
No, but drive's not bad, man. I needed it. It was a heavy week. So it was a nice little therapeutic drive.
And what are you working on? You're working on an undergrad, bachelor's, or?
I'm in medical school right now.
So when you say like big tests, you mean like it's actually like pretty important?
We're learning about the kidney right now. So a lot of just like electrolytes.
I just know I have one.
You have two.
I have two. Okay. Well, how many? One gallbladder?
One gallbladder.
So I don't have any of them anymore. I just got that taken out
really?
recently. Yeah, that was horrible.
I bet.
Horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, not to go on a whole side tangent, right? But I thought it was just heartburn. And I ended up having to like wake my wife up and I'm like, I just need you to sit with me. I don't know what's going on, but it like the pain radiated up to my shoulder and like I could only be somewhat okay if I was like, it looked like I was almost praying if I was like Muslim, right? So like if I was like, I don't know, like downward dog, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then, eventually I looked it up and I was like, it's gallstones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're learning about kidney stones right now, but same kind of deal. So
I'm sure the pain's got to be somewhat similar.
I've heard it's terrible. We talk about how terrible it is. So what they took it out?
They took it
surgery?
out. Yeah, they took it out within like 3 hours.
Felt better after or what?
I felt phenomenal after, but I was also I don't talk about this too often, and I'm sure I scared the shit out of my mom. But like obviously in recovery, haven't had pain meds in a very long time. Pain meds are obviously my drug of choice.
Right.
So when they like had to operate and whatnot, like I was on like heavy everything.
Right.
And it was scary for a second because I was like,
for sure.
I feel great.
For sure.
But then I like remember where I was and I was like, I just had surgery. Like, but luckily because of like my support network and stuff, like I was okay. But
that's awesome.
Discharged the right way. Didn't need like pain meds or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, leading up to it was so bad.
I bet.
But yeah, so thank God for people like you.
Yeah.
Or future you.
Surgery is really cool in that way because like somebody like yourself comes in excruciating pain, and then as a surgeon you can just go in and do your thing. And then did you even stay overnight in the hospital, or were you right out afterward?
So they actually kept me for a few days.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
And I'm not sure why exactly.
Yeah.
It might have been just because of I don't know, just the way that I was like progressing afterwards and like post-op or whatever. But I mean, I've had other surgeries where, like I've had like reconstructive knee surgery and
those are quick.
They're like, all right, you're going to walk out of here. I'm like, hold on. I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to walk out of here? And they're like, no, really, like that's what the procedure's for. Like we need you to, start moving now.
Yeah.
So it's pretty wild.
It's a very satisfying career in that regard because like, you have the ability and the skill set to just fix somebody on the spot and then literally get to send them back home, maybe that day, maybe the next couple of days. So very, very satisfying like way to work, and obviously like in relation to recovery, you know, it's like it's almost the same thing as like helping the new guy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Do you know, I don't know if it works like this, if it works exactly like this, or if it works absolutely nothing like this, but so do you know where exactly you'll land on the surgery spectrum just yet? Do you know if you're going to be like emergency medicine, or are you going to be like scheduled stuff, plastic surgery?
Yeah, I'm like really into neurosurgery right now.
Okay.
So it's I run like a lot of really long races, and I kind of like came into, that'll come into scope later, but I came into med school and I knew I wanted surgery. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in surgery yet, but as students, like you're allowed to kind of like shadow other docs and go in the OR and kind of just get like a look at what different kinds of surgery specialties do. So I did that and landed on neurosurgery and kind of had an idea of like what neurosurgery was before I came to school too. And just fell in love with kind of the intensity of it. And I like to refer to it as the ultra marathon of medicine, which is, you know, very, I don't know, it's just cool. You know, you have guys that are doing like 20+ hour surgeries at one time, and just kind of like, I feel like it would be a good way for me to like, I feel as though like I'm a very intense person, and it'd almost be like a good way for me to kind of use that intensity to help others.
So 20 hours, I mean, dumb question. Can't take a break. Right?
Yeah, like,
I mean, if you can, maybe, but like,
you can, but you'd have to break scrub. So break the sterile field, leave. And a lot of the times when you're operating on people, and I'm not like I'm a first year, I'm not a professional, but a lot of the times like it is under a lot of pressure. So, you know, you're on the clock kind of, you don't want to keep the patient sedated. You know, you have O2 going to the brain, but in some circumstances, like it can only like, you want to get it done as fast as possible to prevent complications. So a lot of the surgeons that are kind of operating on those big operations are just so interested and so engrossed like in what they're doing and what they have to do, and just in all the small little minute details that like it just doesn't even matter. Like if you have to pee, like it's just like the spirit kind of almost takes over, and like the physical and like the fatigue and, you know, having to like pee, it's just like,
it's non-existent.
It's just not even a thing. You're just so interested in the task.
I mean, it's got to be adrenaline too, right?
Yeah, and I really like that. And then, you know, that combined with like helping other people and kind of like we were talking about too, like just that, like being able to like, you know, see the patient like after you operate on them and just see like, you know, just how you were able to like serve them and like how grateful they are, and, you know, just to be in that position to like really help somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I assume any type of surgery is high risk, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, neurosurgery's got to be like up there with the heart or higher. I'm not sure. But before we go on like a whole tangent, because I have a ton of questions about like you currently, right? You weren't always in medical school.
No.
You weren't always, for all things considered, you weren't always a good student.
No.
And there's a reason why I had, obviously, you know, we had connected and like, you know, we're sitting on Pain with a Purpose. So walk me through like growing up in East Coast wise paradise, because you're from Ocean City.
Yeah, Ocean City, New Jersey.
But yeah, so walk me through that and like where you might have like taken a few like wrong turns, whatever the case may be. You know, and then we'll kind of go from there, because like, you know, the whole med school thing, I have a plethora of questions. You know, but I think like the really cool part is that, you know, much like you have kind of alluded to on your Instagram before, right? But like, there's like, when you think of someone that struggles or even in recovery with like drinking or drugging or just, you know, alcoholism or this spiritual malady, for all things considered, you don't think of like a doctor, right? And maybe that's our own doing because we've created that, but there's still a huge stigma that surrounds not only just people like myself and people like yourself, but just like what addiction is even allowed to be associated with. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where, you know, I kind of found it very intriguing to have you on.
Yeah.
But yeah, walk me through your childhood and we'll go from there.
Yeah. And I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
grateful to be here. I don't know, like I grew up pretty obviously in a really cool place. I loved surfing, being by the beach. It's, you know, a hot spot in the summer. Winter comes around, it's a ghost town. But yeah, just to kind of sum it up, I mean, I just remember as a kid being very like consumed in things. I think that was like my big thing, is just the book talks a lot about obsession. Like 12-step book mentions the word obsession and the way that kind of people that have substance problems tend to think. And I related to that a lot when I read the book for the first time, and kind of just was, as far as I can remember, like obsessed with things, like not even just, you know, alcohol and drugs right away, but kind of like skateboarding and, you know, making music for a while, and just all these like little things that like I really found enjoyment in, and I really felt like I like needed to do or had a purpose to do. I was just very like consumed and would become very consumed like very quickly. So as you can imagine, it's like I find alcohol and drugs and the same thing starts to happen. And yeah, kind of just like spiraled out of control very quickly. I was very popular in high school. I had a lot of friends. But I was always the drug guy. Like I was always the guy that like wanted to get a bag or wanted to take things to like the next level, and was trying to like convince people to go in on, you know, whatever. And I don't know, like I knew it might very well like become a problem, but it was a lot of fun for a while, and until it wasn't. And yeah, just to sum it up, like, you know, beat me down to my knees. Like burned bridges, family members cut me off, in and out of psych wards, on handfuls of psychiatric medication that I really didn't need to be on, all honestly, because, you know, my problem was just alcoholism and the spiritual malady, like you touched on, and not being really connected or plugged in, not knowing like my disease or what specifically I suffer from, not having a solution to that disease. You know, not being in contact with God, not praying, kind of just being out of touch there, you know, and just self-medicating with alcohol. But the funny thing was, like, even when I would go to rehab or go to detox, or be locked in a psych ward, I would come off of booze and all the stuff I was doing for like, you know, like 7 to 14 days. And like, I would still feel worse. Like I would always feel like I like wasn't getting better. And, you know, like you're in these places with like a roommate, and you get kind of tight with your roommate while you're there. And I felt like most of the people around me were always getting better in some regard. And I never felt that way. Like I felt like I was becoming more separate or becoming worse and not able to like handle things. And that's when I really started freaking out, like, oh, there might be something that's like really, really wrong here. But then you go back to the book and you read about the disease in the book, and it's like drinking is but a symptom, you know? So it made a lot of sense that like I suffered from the spiritual malady. Like it wasn't drinking. Like drinking and getting high was just how I dealt with it. So yeah, long story short, it was like in and out of rehab a bunch. I was like 18, 19 years old at the time. But
Wow.
I was using like since like 16, but kind of like just the way my personality was, like just very like, once I like found it, like once I found what I liked, it was just, I just went all in on it, because that's
if it ain't
just
broke, don't fix it.
yeah, that's just, I knew what I liked, and you just weren't going to stop me from getting it.
So before I go on a whole tangent, you alluded to the idea that this is a disease, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, God willing, a few years to come from now when you are a doctor, because like that, like, and I've said it a few times on here previously, right? But like my thing very early on in recovery, not so much now, but like I pick and choose my battles on social media, where people like try to say that this is a choice. You know, so like that's like me taking the jab again, right? Like I'll make a reel somehow, where it's like, you know, essentially doctors alluding to this being a disease, right? Not a doctor yet, but obviously in med school, where, you know, and this is not your words, right? But it's in the DSM-5, right? Like this is absolutely a disease.
Right.
But, you know, to the mainstream public, if you will, they're like, well, no, if David wanted to stop, he would have just stopped. And it's like, well, what if I never had the power to stop, right? And what if I, furthermore, didn't really know what I was getting myself into? Maybe I played a part there, but as far as this spiritual malady and like finding like what works for me, right? Like I had no choice in the matter if I was doing it or not doing it or thinking about it. but you touched on a really, really important part for people like us, where it's like I go into a treatment center, I get off a detox, I'm finally sober for the first time in however many, days, months, years, whatever.
Yeah.
Why isn't my life and my mindset getting like 100% better immediately? Right. And I get like, I did some damage, so it takes some time to get out of it. But what I'm essentially saying is like, why am I not trending up? Yeah. Right. Like you took away like the one thing that was ruining my life, and I'm continuing to spiral down, which really different. I think it plays a huge role in like someone that has it rather than some of my friends that have like gone through this and are able to like still drink successfully.
Right.
Where it's like when I don't have it, if you're going to take away the most powerful thing in my life, and before I know it, and not put, some sort of like power or God or AA or some other thing in place of it, it's literally only a matter of time before I like do something to seek relief.
Right.
So I feel like we don't talk, I haven't talked about that too much on this, platform just yet. But that's like that's the meat and potatoes of what we suffer from.
It's important to talk about, but it's also like, it's also like, I felt like it was a very necessary part of my process was like that initial like realization. And then also just all the pain that kind of followed afterward, and just kind of having to go through like that process of breakdown to ultimately like build something new out of it. But and then the other thing too that I really struggled with early on, I'd say, is at the time I was like 19, 20 years old. I got sober when I was 20. That was like my final, I just turned 20. And just the idea of like, how am I going to derive any kind of happiness, meaning, or purpose in a life where I can't have a drink, go out to the bar for my 21st birthday with all my buddies, smoke weed. Like I just couldn't even fathom that thought. So wrestling with that thought as well. And I recently came across a quote too that I think is like I actually posted it on my Instagram, but very relevant to what we're talking about. And it's the last thing that you'd want to take away from an alcoholic trying to get sober is the pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember sitting in a similar situation, and I would come up with these scenarios, much like yourself, where it was like, how am I never going to drink again? How am I going to do this for the rest of my life? Right. Forgetting one day at a time. Like you're going to tell me when my daughter gets married, I'm not going to,
right,
be able to toast a whatever. Right. Or if, I get a promotion, I'm not allowed to celebrate at happy hour. And it's like, Chris, do you have a job right now? No. And it's like, so what are you talking about? Do you have any kids? No. Okay. So it's like, so like we can go through all of that stuff, but the truth of the matter is that, to keep it relevant, right? Especially being in med school, right? There's probably not many, if any, doctors that are out here like tying one on, right? That are able to, to perform surgery,
right, with
a clear mind and like with it absolute, perfection. It has to be perfect, right? Under the influence, so it's like also like us wanting or thinking about something in that regard, right? To fast forward to like, you probably never thought you were going to be in medical school.
No, never.
It's just like not a normal thought, right? But like the abnormal becomes normal for us when we're like, what do you mean I can't do this?
Yeah.
But like reverse psychology a little bit, where it's like, well, let's forget about you can't do what you want to do or what you think you need to do or what you think you need in your life to be okay. What if we were to tell you that like you cannot not drink? And you're like, well, hold on, now you're onto something, but that's for a whole nother episode because that might be too deep for people.
Yeah.
Right? God forbid we talk too much about like the spirituality, right? We might lose some people, but, all right. So you eventually got sober at 20.
Yeah.
Right? Went to California,
was first in Florida for a little bit. But basically like the thing that I like to say about it is I went to rehab and I met these people that were just, when I go to rehab, I'm in a bad mood. Like I don't really like being there. I'm just not really that ecstatic about the situation. But so unfortunately for me, like my last rehab stay, there was a group of people there that were just really excited about AA and
like
that
clients or like patients,
clients and staff.
Okay.
And a big group of clients that were younger guys. So I gravitated toward them and I just didn't really understand their enthusiasm for it when I first got there. I didn't understand how people could be excited about the thought of not drinking for the rest of your life when you're 20 years old. But yeah, these kids were just fired up. They were like excited to go to meetings and excited to get a sponsor and excited to work the steps, excited about like the idea of like what would happen if they let sobriety iterate. Like if they removed one thing or two things, drinking and getting high, if they removed like two things from their life, just two, like how big and how much that would change their life over the course of like not a couple of days, not a couple of months, but like over the course of like a decade, 2 decades. Like the way that sobriety kind of iterates and you see it like in the rooms and you see it in these guys that have like 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. It's just like the radical change of person and the radical change of character and perspective. They were really into that idea. And at the time, I don't really think I could even fathom that full perspective of what I'm saying now. But I think that the thing that really stuck with me was I just wanted to feel something real at the time. I was like getting high and I was drinking and I was making myself like feel a certain way, but it was really just all fake at the end of the day. And I wanted to feel just a stimulus that was real. And I felt realness coming out of their voices with the way that they would talk about AA, with the way that they viewed the world as a result of the way that they thought about AA. And I just wanted that. I just wanted that. And that was just enough for me to kind of like be a little bit more open-minded into staying in treatment, not going home. Going to meetings, taking it seriously, getting a sponsor, taking it seriously, working the steps. It was just, and I say that because like, I also like, it's very important for me, at least, to stay excited about this. And honestly, it's like, it's not really even hard for me to do that anymore because this has given me I feel very much so that I'm living a life that I'm like unqualified to live because of the program and the support that we have in the program. And literally like free of charge too. Like I got like 10 people in my contact. I could call right now. They would pick up on the first ring. Like it's like they got like a small army answering their phone calls for them. Or they'd pick up at 3 a.m. if I called them at 3 a.m. And that's like really special to have. And that's a resource. Like that's a very big resource in this world. And that can take you very far. So I just try to always make it a point to like stay excited about this. And I'm not like embarrassed to stay excited about it because it's at the time it was like the worst thing that ever happened to me. But like, couple years in the future, 6 years in April, God willing, like it's actually been the best thing that's ever happened to me. So
it's wild. I mean, you said a lot of profound stuff, right? But like, it's really wild how what at one point in my life was like literally the biggest like thorn in my side. Where I was like, this is like, I can't believe this. I'm in my whatever number treatment center at 23 years old. This is my life. Like, this is what I'm going to be forever. This is like what I'm going to amount to, right? I'll just come in and out of treatment until I eventually just kind of like, do my family a favor and like pass, right? But thank God that wasn't my story. I very much had the same experience where like people were like, no, man, we're going back to the sober house and like we're going back and we're getting back into the big book and we're like, and I'm like, you're doing what?
Like after the meeting too.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
You just sat in a meeting for an hour.
But you referenced like, the conversations that you guys were having while in there about like, if you guys were able to remove like one or two things and how that would like definitely change the course, right, of your life over the next 5, 10, 2 decades, right? Like, and we referenced somebody that when we were walking down here, right, a mutual friend of like Ian from Surfside, right? Yeah. And he celebrates 20 today.
2 decades, yeah.
Which is absolutely insane.
Crazy.
Because if you look at, we don't even have to get deep into it, but if you look at like it's not even the life, right? If you look at like, and it says it in the book, right? Like you'll have a host of friends, right? If you look at the community that like him, Alyssa, Surfside, Saltwater Athletics have built around them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, what else is life really about?
It's massive.
Yeah. And you want to talk about like, I saw you over there getting like a little bit like, like teary eyed and stuff like that. It's like, it's very deep stuff, right?
It's
like
real.
All I ever wanted in my life was genuine connections, right?
Yeah.
And the only time I ever felt genuine connections was when I was under the influence with like a few of my buddies, and it was all facade, right? Like it was fake. and I put it up on my Instagram story today where I was like, thank God for good sobriety. If you ever hear me talk about this, is like, and I put a picture up of Ian's post and I was like, this is what I'm alluding to.
Yeah.
Like this is real, right? And it's for every one of us.
Yeah.
And furthermore, not to get like super corny, right? But like you can be whatever you want, right?
Literally,
like not only can you also get sober, you want to be a doctor, go be a fucking doctor.
Dude, it's whatever, I mean? It's free. Everything's available.
Yeah.
Like if you have the resources and you're sober and my friend always likes to call it dating God. If you date God, you can do whatever you want. Like it's just, everything's available for you to access.
Mm-hmm.
That's been my experience. And that's really like my message, like with the Instagram and with, obviously I'm doing other things in med school and stuff, but like one of the biggest things that I would just like to tell people, like young people that are struggling, is just like, it's available to you. Like and you don't have to like wait. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to pay any money. Like you go to a meeting and you get plugged in with the right people, like the people that are like really doing this, and you get those resources that are waiting for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of time. Like it's a matter of time. So.
And then on the flip side of it, not to like allude to like our answer, right? But like when you get to sit down and like actually bring somebody else through the book and see, the light come on in their eyes.
Yeah.
Which is a contradiction, right? Because people are like, well, it's like blind leading the blind. Well, it's really not, right? Like think about the first time you got your first job, right?
Yeah.
At whatever place in Ocean City.
Yeah.
And like you were being trained and you were like, they were trying to tell you how to work whatever internal system they had.
Yeah.
And you were shaking your head and you were like, yep, whatever you say. Yep. No problem. And like, you're not taking any of it in.
Right.
Fast forward 3 months later, they like, Dave, we need you to train so-and-so. It's his first day.
Yeah.
And now, like the back of your hand, it's the same exact thing.
Right.
But we can't keep it unless we give it away.
100%.
So enough of like, cause I can get real corny. But like, you touched on it, right? Like I get fired up about it because like I have absolutely nothing in my life without everything that you just talked about. I didn't know how to make a phone payment. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about being in medical school.
Dude, yeah.
I didn't know how to do simple adulthood things.
Neither did I.
Furthermore, I didn't know how to not act like a child.
Yeah.
Right. And thank God for whatever it was that like kind of, you want to call it God's grace or you want to call it like a moment of clarity. You can call it whatever you want. Right. But thank God it unfolded the way that it did, because like when I was in treatment and furthermore with the recovery house that I went to, if there was a bunch of people in that house that weren't about shit, that's my baseline. Right. So like I would have followed suit there too. The only reason I truly believe this, right, is that like early on when that window of opportunity was open, I was following people that were like very much fired up about like the solution.
Right.
And if like I didn't get put in a place like that, if I didn't have people that like advocated for me in a treatment center that were like, yo, dude, you don't want to go here, that's okay. We know. But you're going to go there. And despite yourself, you're going to get better. They didn't do that. Who knows where I would be?
That's a very important point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got sober in the same kind of environment. It was like, if you didn't want to be there, or if you said you wanted to be there, but you weren't acting like you wanted to be there, then you were, I think like the first step in the removal process was like, you had to sleep in the driveway. And then
Cali's different.
Dead
Was that Florida or Cali?
No, it was Cali. The weather was nice though. It was never raining.
But it was a TC though, too, right? Or it was therapeutic community, or
it was a therapeutic community, like sober, like structured sober living, long-term year program sober living. And they had like their own kind of like PIP, like inpatient. So like they kind of had the ability to do that. And it was just a very intense, like you talk about like not knowing like how to be a man. I didn't know. I was a child. Like I didn't know how to make my bed in the morning. I didn't know how to like follow a normal routine. And this place like just whipped me into shape. And it was exactly what I needed. If I didn't make my bed, I wrote an essay. If I didn't clean.
Dude, I was just going to ask that. So my buddy would tell me stories. I'm like, you have to do, hold on.
You got to write words. Yeah. Every morning we'd sit out. There'd be a strike board, right? So like the rule was that you had to write at least 3 strikes a day on your roommates. So you saw your roommate leave a cup out or not clean his dish all the way. Then you wrote down like, oh, so-and-so didn't clean his dish. Every morning you sit down. First thing that you do is everybody's in the living room and you read off the strike board. So if I just left my coffee cup here and I went upstairs to take a shower and like didn't properly clean it or whatever, then I left my coffee cup out. My roommate sees it. He writes it down on the strike board. Next morning I wake up, it gets read off in front of everybody. Like, David left his coffee cup here 11 o'clock in the morning yesterday, 300 words. And you tally up your words, and then every day you got to write that amount of words for the mistakes that you did yesterday before midnight. So it was just like this community, like just like this massive like accountability community, and like where you're forced to hold your roommates, your friends accountable. That's like an uncomfortable thing, especially when you're in your first couple months of sobriety and you just want to make friends and you're not even feeling normal yourself, but you're expected to like hold people to the standard. But it's so important because like you do that enough and eventually you learn how to hold yourself accountable. Eventually, like, you learn the importance of like getting up every day at the same time and making your bed and, you know, praying, and like just these small little details that like these guys that I was living with were taking like so seriously, like really just like illuminated the path for me. And I just like, I like loved some of the guys I lived with, like some of the guys that were there longer than me and really like crushing it. And, you know, like, you know what happens, like you get 8 months under your belt and family comes back in, you get a job, you get fit, you're in the gym every day, you know, like your diet's good, you're not drinking anymore. So I just like, I looked up to these guys that were like just really like kicking ass, and I wanted that like really bad. And I'm still like that in my life today. Like I have a standard, like to my friends, like I expect you to like, if I'm doing something wrong, like I expect you to like hold me accountable. Like I keep that very clear, and it's a two-way street too. Like, you know, I pull my friends' covers as well. And I'm still like really good friends with a lot of people I went through the house with, despite being back on the other side of the country. Most of my friends are still over there, but because that bond, that trauma bond is so tight, it's just like, I could go out there tomorrow and pick up right where I left off, like not even feel uncomfortable at all, you know? And it's just really taught me like the value of like who you have around you. Like I need to make sure that I have people, like if I'm not moving forward, I'm moving backwards. And that's outside of just recovery. And I have no problem like cutting people off if I feel that it's not like a mutual and accountable friendship. I've cut off plenty of people. I've cut off people in recovery. You know, but I think that it's just like being at that house just taught me like the importance of like having the right people around you, because that's like really going to influence the person that you become. And that's one of the things that you can control too. You can't control everything, but that's definitely a controllable.
I mean, it's a really, really interesting thing, right? Because like we come from this lifestyle, whether you came from like the absolute worst scenario growing up or like a normal scenario, if that's even a thing, or like a very well off scenario, it doesn't matter. Where what you're alluding to is like, you know, we come into recovery or treatment and you're like, oh, well, you know what I mean? I'm not going to snitch on that guy, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's encouraged, right? Because like now you know what you're walking into, right? You're also seeking validation from your peers, right? Where it's like, you want to be liked, you want friendships, you're trying to build relationships, yet it'll be the last time that because I don't want to write, right? So it'll be the last time you leave your coffee cup out.
Yeah.
You know, it happens one time, it's, you know what I mean? But it's like really, it's forcing you into this, that saying, right? Where it's like water seeks its own level, right? Yeah. Where it's like, if everybody's elevating, so true. Right? There's no real need to have somebody like, if you're not going to get with the program, right? Like, hey, love you, bud, but like, I can't put my energy into like trying to like have you live this lifestyle. Like this is like the trajectory that I feel like I need to be on. Right. Yeah. And if I'm not, you know, like fully focused on that, right. Like I get one life. Right. It's a really cool thing, man. I wish like I feel like we could benefit a lot from like more treatment centers like that.
I want to, like that's on my radar for way down the line. I would love to like have a little house that's like, just because it changed my life. Like if I wasn't in a place like that, if I was in a place that kind of babied you more, like didn't really like, oh, you don't want to go to a meeting, that's okay. You know, it's not like this is life or death. Like it is life or death. So like I do need it. Like you talking about like we'd go to a meeting, we'd get back home. It's like, instead of turning on the TV, we would like have to crack the book open again, because we'd have to do a 10-step every night before we went to bed. We would read through that question part, and I forget what page it's on.
Yeah.
And like go through in a small group, like, what did I do wrong today? Who was I resentful at today? What could I, like, after the meeting, you know? And if you weren't working, you had to go to 2 meetings a day. And like, it just like, it didn't matter at this place. Like it didn't matter how big your life got. It didn't matter how good you were doing. It didn't matter that you had the girlfriend or had the job or were making the money, like you still had to go to a meeting every day. So guys were getting up at like 4 a.m. just so that they could go bike down to the local meeting at 5 a.m. before they went and worked a 10-hour shift, 12-hour shift, because like it didn't matter. Like that's what it was. Like this is the standard, and you need to meet the standard or you're sleeping in the driveway. And if you continue to do it, then you just can't live here. And guys like really like took to that, and they were like, okay, like I understand now how serious this is. Like I understand that this is life or death. And then you got the new guys coming in like me, seeing that example, like seeing that like sticking to the structure of the house. And I'm like, okay, like I need to do that too then, you know, if I want to stay here. It just like sets the whole thing up for success. And I agree with you. Like I think that style of recovery is like, sure, like is it intense? Is there problems with like, yeah, and it doesn't work for everybody either. Like there are things that people need that like that kind of environment doesn't provide. But for me, like that was just a setup for, I still think about it when I don't clean my dish right away. I'm like, oh, that would be 300 words back in the day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Or I still make my bed every morning because of that place. It's just served me so well.
I mean, you said something and then we'll move on, but you said something like really profound, right? Where it's like these guys, like it was the requirement, right? Where they were waking up at 4, right? To like bike into wherever they had to go to a meeting because then they had to work 12 hours after. It took me right back to like my trauma and early recovery, right? Because whether it's good trauma or not, like whatever, that's my experience. I left my job with the city of Philadelphia when I got sober because it just wasn't conducive to my recovery.
Right.
So I went through a temp agency. Long story short, I got a job where I was working mandatory. Like, yeah, the money was cool because I was in early sobriety and like I forget about like money management. That was a whole nother thing. But like it was mandatory 6 days a week. 12 hours a day. So 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. every single day, right? You get an hour for lunch.
Brutal.
And if you were smart, you were able to like figure out a way to like shut your eyes for 15 minutes, right? So you could like, you know, not be delusional. But at that point in my recovery, I was also managing the recovery house, right? And like, I never really slipped on my duties there. I still had to be in a meeting every single night. I still had to be sponsorable and have sponsees. And like I was more energized back then than I am now, right? Which doesn't make sense, right? No. But what I'm trying to say, and if anybody can relate to that, right? It's like I would 100% was more on like a spiritual basis back then. And now that I said it, like I can make an honest and conscious decision to get back to at least like halfway there. But yeah, it's it worked for me. Right. Yeah. It worked for me. It's absolutely like something that I needed. And again, it's not that like, you know, it works for everybody, right? Like I'm also a very big, I'm pro seeking help for mental health, right? Because I've gone through my own shit as well.
Right.
But yeah, man, I feel like I would love to see more providers or more places or more whatever get back to a place like that where it's like, hey, maybe what worked 100 years ago still works today. What a novel idea, right?
Let's not reinvent the wheel.
So, but that's like a perfect segue into, so about roughly a year ago, you were in like this like group chat with all of your friends.
Yeah.
Which has now turned into a little bit larger group chat. Almost like 60K larger. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, essentially touch on the Instagram piece, right? Because like, it's obviously very powerful, right? There's obviously a lot of people that it resonates with. And like, who are we to say that like, you know, if you can touch one person with that page, right? Like whether you know it or not, like you're again, pouring more good into the world.
Right.
Especially in a society where it's like we take.
Yeah.
So yeah, touch on that a little bit.
So that's just been, basically like, I didn't have my phone when I was away in that structured living that we were talking about.
I was going to ask that. I figured that,
yeah, they didn't let you have that. But when I got it back, I, you know, was just met a lot of people in the rooms and met a lot of people kind of just taking AA seriously, and got involved in group chats, and people are sending like spiritual literature over the phone every morning and like daily stoic and, you know, prayers and motivating stuff. And it's just something that like I always loved like starting my day off with. And one of my house manager when I was at that house in California. You actually remind me just like my house manager. He was also from this area. He was from St. Vincent, like Eagles fan, just very like Philly. But he would always start the day off with like a motivational speech from YouTube. So like that's just kind of the culture that I got sober in, and I kind of just took to that. And it's just something I love to do, was to just like share like, oh, this is like my daily reading book. I'm going to send it in a group chat with all my buddies. This is like a podcast I was watching yesterday. I clip a part of it, send it, and kind of just like got the idea of like, maybe I should just make a platform for this where like I can, instead of just sending it in a group chat, you know, just put it out there for anybody who wants to see, can follow the page. And that whole thing kind of just transpired into the Instagram account. And I don't know, I just feel like after reflecting on it, and I've had it for about a year, I think that like the best way to like start things like that is to kind of just go with something that, you know, is like a instinct almost. Like it's just something that you would do anyway. Like, you know, like I was sending motivational stuff in group chats for years, like before I decided to start that Instagram account. So I just knew like I had the content, and I knew like people appreciated it, and I knew that I just wouldn't stop because I've been doing it for so long. And I think that those like natural impulses are the best things to like act on, and they're the things that like tend to blossom the most. And I think that my Instagram is like kind of shows that to be true, because it's just the same thing I've been doing for years. I just decided to put it on an Instagram page, and now it's just like, you know, I have changed it up a little bit, and I write a lot of my own stuff and kind of try to incorporate my own experience into it. And I never really expected it to get that big. I just expected it to my friends to follow it, and I would just put it out there. But yeah, so that's been a really cool thing, because, you know, it's just fun to play with, you know, it's fun to help people, and it's fun to, you know, have people in your DMs like, hey, this really helped me out. And, you know, goes back to the point of like, why would I not like put my story out there? Why would I not like share things that are going to like spark the same fire, like talking about excitement, like get the same like excitement flowing in another person that's, you know, 19 years old, wondering how they're going to stay sober for the rest of their life. So, yeah, it's just like gradually, like as I got sober and more comfortable with myself, I was just like, I don't really care. Like I'll put it online. Like I don't really care like what people think. Like, it's just, so.
I've said it previously, I'll say it again, and I'm going to eventually start to sound like a broken record, but like what it ended up, when in early sobriety, I was like posting like just like Facebook like quotes, right? Like motivating Facebook quotes. And like some of like my boys essentially in the sober house were like, oh, okay, Woods, like we get it, man. And it's like, it wasn't like I was trying to preach to anybody, but it was how I was starting my day.
Yeah.
But at that point in my life, like I was so concerned about what other people thought of me, right? Because like where I got sober, like we had our phones, we had, you know what I mean? So like for some reason, like I took like one of those character defects into, you know, my sobriety, right? And like it was very short lived, right? Until, you know, most recently with all this, it's like, I don't care, right? Like I don't care whether people are saying good stuff, bad stuff, or whatever. Like I still have to go to sleep with myself. Right. So like, what's it matter what anybody says?
Right.
And then I would circle back to the thought of like, if I can help one person that's like hesitant to even say that they have a problem, or they're struggling, or they failed 9 times, or maybe they're 19 and they have no clue what they're going to do with themselves. And then they log on to Instagram and find out that there's like another kid that got sober when he was 19, 20, and now he's in medical school. And like that could like turn a light on for him or them. Why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
So it, I mean, I had the same thing. It's just like, it took me a lot longer. Right. Yeah. Also, I'm not as polished as you, but I forgot to do my whole social media plug. Forgot to do the whole thing.
Oh, really?
So if you've been listening to this point, follow us on Instagram at PainWPurpose, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, Pain with a Purpose podcast. Like, comment, subscribe. Do your whole thing, whatever the content creators say, do that. That's my whole spiel. So after that, now the awkwardness for me is done. Anyway, I digress. So to keep it current, right? Obviously, you know, like California played a huge part, right? Like, thank God for like whoever those owners were that like were like we're going to do it this way and we don't care what anybody else thinks because we know what works. Would you say that it was like the population or like your current housemates, was it more of like the younger population? Was it more like the failure to launch type deal? Or did you have some older individuals in there? Because I'm sure if somebody had like a little bit more lived experience, right? And like, God forbid you were pulling them up for not pushing their chair in. Like, I'm sure that wasn't like always well received.
Right.
But was it always like the younger population or what?
It was mostly younger, but we had a mix of everybody. We had like, everybody had a drug or alcohol problem. Actually, no. Actually, some people had other problems, but mostly young. We did have some older people though. And yeah, I don't know. Like there were like, I feel like it wasn't even the older people that would get mad about being held accountable. It was just
probably somebody like me, young, and you're like,
people.
Grown ass man, dude. Like, no, you're not, dude.
Yeah.
You're technically homeless.
You can imagine how lethal it would get some mornings when you have a bunch of alcoholics, like newly sober alcoholics, and then somebody reading off a strike board of.
You're like, David, I thought you were my boy. Come on. But there's the accountability piece, right? Because you were upheld to get 3 a day, right? From what you saw in your surroundings, right?
Yeah.
Because then if not, was there repercussions for you not getting 3 a day?
Yeah,
or like
they would double. The words would double, and this was like only one piece of the accountability picture. There, I mean, we would have groups 3 times a week where it was called Poco dinner. So we'd eat dinner, and the whole house was like intertwined. So like, there were chores, there was dinner chefs every week, there was breakfast chef every week, there was work coordinator every week, who was the person that counted everybody's words to make sure everybody was writing their words.
You couldn't even get away with it.
No, you couldn't. Like, it was very thought out.
And it had to be handwritten. Yeah.
Couldn't
even rock out with ChatGPT.
No.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and you had to write about like prompts. So the work coordinator would make prompts. So it was 2 recovery related prompts. And then the last one was like, could be anything. So it could be like on the good days, it was like song lyrics. So you could just write song lyrics, over and over again. But, yeah, so we would have Poco dinners where you'd write a positive on somebody in the house and then you'd write a concern on somebody in the house, and they would get mixed up in a bowl and every single one would get read off. And every time there was a concern on somebody, they would have to stay quiet, and the rest of the roommates would be able to raise their hands and give addressing feedback to the person the consequence was on.
This was a real TC.
This was like real deal, like behavioral modification, like. And like, it wasn't coming from the feedback was rarely coming from like any of the staff or the manager. I mean, it was like the house manager that you live with is kind of like almost a client as well.
Yeah.
But it was mostly just the roommates. So you knew it was just like that just makes it special. It makes it kind of like, it takes off the insurance and money grab thing. Like when it's just coming from your boys that you're living with, like, hey man, I saw you've like been doing this, and like, what's up? Like, is something bothering you?
I mean, the real interesting point that I just thought about in my head too, and then I swear we will move on, is that I'm sure like this wasn't your first treatment center.
No.
Right? So like you probably went the conventional route, or your family probably helped you out a bunch of different times where they were like, okay, we're going to send David here. We're going to, we've heard of this place, whatever. I'm sure it would work probably just as well for the first timer as well. But like,
right.
At this point you were probably like, we got to try something. We got to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And thank God for that, because, I don't know how, if first time in treatment, if I would have done well, but I can tell you what, 6, 7, 8, 9, like I could have absolutely, I think might have been straightened out a little bit sooner than it took for me. I just didn't know about it.
Nothing worse than waking up in that detox bed the first morning.
Oh,
you got to wake up. You like got somebody sleeping in the bed next to you. You're like, where am I? Waiting the med line to get your meds.
We're like day 3 back in detox, and you're like, you're getting your shower because like that you have to, but like you feel horrible because that the water's gonna like sting when it hits you. But right before you jump into the shower, you're just looking in the mirror and you're like, you piece of shit. How in the world did you end up here? Because like I'm so distorted that I think I actually had I'm morally somehow meant to be there, right? When it was like that's never what I was sick with, right?
Yeah.
And then like leaving treatment and being like, I'm done. I'm never doing this again. Fast forward 3-6 months later, and you're like, how in the world did I end up back here? Right?
Story of my life, dude.
And my family just not understanding it.
Yeah.
They're like, why would you ever do this again? And my genuine answer was like,
don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I couldn't. What I should have said, which I could have, it should have been illegal to say to my family, but like I should have just said like I couldn't take it anymore. Like I had to do something.
Right.
Which again, they would have been like, "What?
Yeah,
what are you talking about? You had to do something. That's not normal. No shit.
Yeah,
I'm not okay." All right. So to keep it current, you're not in California. You're now in Hershey.
Yeah.
How did you land on like not only like wanting to go back to school, right? Well, maybe that was a requirement when you were in California. Like, how are we going to continue to progress? But how did you land on like, I'm going to be a doctor?
Dude, just like the process of breakdown that comes with recovery. I mean, that just sums it up. Like you just get broken and you just figure out that like you were living a life, at least I was living a life that like wasn't me. Like I was just wasting away and like not doing anything, and had like ideas of things that I thought were cool or thought were successful, and it was just like all fake. And really like I just lived with like the purpose of self-gratification, instant gratification, and just didn't really care. And you know, you go through just that pain, and you realize that you don't actually know yourself at all, like straight up. Like you just don't, you just have no idea who you are. And I experienced that, and it's not like the easiest thing to experience, and it took me a while. And he'd be okay with me saying this because we talk a lot, but my dad's actually going through it right now, and he's actually coming up on a year sober, and that's in and of itself has been like a huge, like amazing experience for me to kind of like be there for him. But he's going through that too. So I call him and I'm reminded of like what that pain like really looks like. Cause you know, when you get everything back and med school and ultras and, you know, all these things and all this like beauty and like you can just forget what that was like.
Mm-hmm.
And that process is really like what molded me into this path. Like I don't have any better way to put it. I mean, I think it was just like, I was just okay with like getting beat up and until like it finally got better. I mean, I remember waking up at that structured living house and just thinking like, I am just going to feel like shit the rest of my life. Like I can't see this getting any better. I was, you know, you talk about like mental health. I had anxiety, depression. I was like going crazy in my head. I mean, like uncomfortable, would never have been able to do a podcast with cameras. Like, no, like I would have been mute like the whole time, voice shaking. You know, now I get to like go to AA. I speak in front of AA meetings, like, you know, public speaking, like in front of conferences, like, and it's just like, that is not me. Like you can even ask the people that I lived with in California. Like I was the shyest guy there. I couldn't, like, I had like a problem. And I was just like cool with like, I mean, I wasn't cool with it, but I was just like, whatever, like, I'm just gonna take this like pain and I'm just gonna like listen to what these people are saying, and I'm just gonna pray and I'm just gonna hope. And yeah, just through that process, like, you know, a lot of trial and error. When you get sober, it's like you have like a clean slate of identity and you have to try out different identities. And, you know, I tried out different things. I thought I just wanted to surf and like stay out west. And then I was like, maybe I should go back to school. I went back to school to be a nurse for a little bit. And then, you know, I did the whole thing at school too, where like I would go out on the weekends and go to the bars with people and drink water and Red Bull and stay up till 4 a.m. And then I was just like, what the fuck? Like, I'm wasting this gift. I'm sober and I'm wasting
what
this.
Am I really doing?
Yeah. It's just like, it comes full circle real quick. It's just like, I'm staying up till 4 a.m, dead sober. And I'm going to wake up on Sunday and I'm not going to be hungover, but I'm basically going to be hungover because I got like 3 hours of sleep. And it's just like, it's like at some point in this journey, it's like this like terrible thing of like sobriety actually like turns into like the best thing that's ever happened to you. And it turns into like this ultimate gift. And when you realize that, like, it actually like snaps a lot of things like into perspective real quick. It's just like, and a lot of that has to do with like time management. It's like, I'm so like, my weekends are open, you know what I mean? And like, that's 48 hours. That the rest of the world is going to be doing something different, probably like, you know, people my age at a bar, hanging out with friends. It's like those 48, like I can use that to like catapult myself into like whatever direction I want to go. And it's kind of just been like through a process of trial and error that like eventually it was like I was into school, I was in class, I was sober, I was having a totally different college experience, because my college experience, like before getting sober, was I was only there to party, I was only there to smoke, and I didn't care about class, I didn't care about impressing my professors. But then like, you know, I get sober, I'm sitting in the front of the class, all of a sudden I'm like fired up on Monday to learn about microbiology, and like my test scores go up. I've never been a good student, but you know, I'm like actually interested in this stuff. I'm like, this is kind of cool. And then professors coming up to me after class like, hey, like I have this research idea, I think like, you know, you seem to be doing good on the test, I don't know if you have any time, but like would love to like have you in the lab with me to like work on this thing. If you're open to it, I think you could really be of use. It would really help me out. And like, just like that stuff, just like doors just started opening for me, and I was just walking through them. And eventually I just got to the point where I was like, maybe like this might be so crazy, but like maybe I could like try to go into medical school, because I didn't want to stop school. Like I loved school, and I've always like, you know, I wanted to do nursing, and I always wanted to do something in medicine to some extent. And you know, I had like a lot of like barriers to get over, because like, you know, my GPA was awful. I like was never really the smartest student. I was in a nursing program. I would have had to drop out of the nursing which I did, but it was just like a whole thing, because the last time I like dropped out of the nursing program, I was in the psych ward the next morning. So it was like a lot of familial like PTSD, like mom's like, oh, like, are you okay? Like, you sure?
Like, really, Mom? I've never been better, but like, I know this doesn't sound right, but yes, yeah. I'm okay.
And dude, just
she's
like
probably hanging up the phone. She's like, David's losing his mind again. Now he's gonna be a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, just went for it, man. I think like I didn't get sober to play it safe. Like I knew that like we were talking about like just going to AA, and like I knew I could just take what I was doing at AA, apply it to any entity, and probably be successful, even if it took a while, you know. And that's even past academics. I mean, athletics too, like the running. It's just like taking like what I learned at AA and applying it to running, applying it to training, applying it to academics, applying it to school, applying it to family. It's just it's everywhere in my life, man. It's everywhere. It's like the principles are everywhere, and it's beautiful, because when your life is like, when the roots of AA are like in all areas of your life, and not even like AA, like just like spiritual principles. It's like not even AA. It's like the AA was built off of the Bible. So it's like, you know, it's a lot of just spiritual principles that are just rooted in all areas of my life. And yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, like you couldn't have put it any more perfect, right? Because it's like, you know, when you start to get fired up about this stuff, right? Like people start to look at us a little sideways, and they're like, you okay? But that's how you know someone's changing, right? When we're like, we're acting differently, we're speaking differently, we're much more level-headed, but then we start to have these ideas. And like, again, this is kind of like how Pain with a Purpose, kind of like the whole basis of Pain with a Purpose was like, okay, sobriety's all well and fine, right? Like recovery's great. If that's all that I do in my life, like that's okay too, right? But like that's not my story. My story is that like, and I can't stress this enough. It's not so much from like a fiscal standpoint, right? But it's more of like a financial standpoint. We're allowed to want more out of ourselves, right? We're allowed to want more out of my recovery. I did not get sober for mediocrity,
right?
And for a long time, I thought that like just because I was sober and doing what I needed to do in recovery, that was enough, right? And it's not like my dreams and aspirations were never there, but it was like almost silenced, because it was like, calm down, you know what I mean? And turns out like you're allowed to want whatever you want. Doctor, right?
Yeah. Entrepreneur,
right? And it's crazy to even think about that. Like I have a job, I have a side business, I have a podcast, right? Like there's not enough time in the day, every single day.
Yeah.
But I get it done. You know, and it's pretty cool, man. So we can't leave out, because you only alluded to it, right? But like you keep saying ultra, and for the people that are not like, you know, too hip to the game, right? And I heard you like talk about it a little bit, and I was like, 6 hours of running.
Yeah.
And that's not even like the longest that you've gone, right? Like you've done, is that an ultra?
Yeah. What, 40 miles? Yeah, 40 miles is the ultra. Yeah.
So like, how do you get to that point, right?
I think it just comes back to like name of this podcast, like just once you go through the ringer and, you know, getting sober, and then you stick it out and you see like what it does for you and you see the perspective that it gives you, it's just like, and going back to what you just said, it's like you want more and you're allowed to want more. And ultra is like the perfect avenue for that self-discovery piece that we get a lot in recovery. And yeah, I don't know. It's just like, I just think of it as like fat, like a bunch of like life experience just packed into a race, because the race is filled with highs and lows and you don't really know when the next good feeling is going to come and the next bad feeling is going to come. And eventually it's just like, you have to work through all these emotions and you have to work through all these just like negative thoughts. And eventually you get to the finish line and you've just gone through like 5 years of like emotion in like 20 hours. Like it's so like just the growth that you experience after you like reflect on an experience like that is really like what I take away from it the most. But I'm also just a runner, you know. It's definitely not for everybody. I've run most of my life. Even when I was in high school, I was a runner. I wasn't all that great at it because I was, you know, doing other things that weren't healthy. But yeah, it's just something that I've like come to fall in love with, and just fitness in general. Just makes me feel good, and just like another way to put a challenge in front of me, and another way to kind of like, I feel like you need like a healthy dose of war in your daily routine, and ultra and running and waking up early before class to run. Like I need that in my life, you know, even when I say I'm like too busy to do it, or I'm in med school now, it's just, I just ran like a 40 miler while in med school, which was pretty cool because like
your first one since being in med school.
Yeah.
Right?
Because a lot of people are like, oh, you better kiss ultra goodbye. You're just not going to be able to train how you want to train, which is true. But, I don't want to be the person that just like leaves that behind, you know, and especially with like my Instagram page and everything I talk about, like, it's just like, I don't know, man, it's just healthy. I've had, you know, 10-mile runs with no headphones that have like done more for me than like, you know, a therapy session, or, you know, like sometimes like an AA meeting. It's just like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine, dude.
It's
like, listen, clearly not a runner.
You're in shape. You're in shape though,
but
man.
I'm top heavy though, right? So like my cardio consists of like, if I am, you know, kicking it above a 3.5 on the treadmill, if I got a light jog going on, maybe a fast walk, you know, what I'm getting at is like, if I'm pushing myself, and even like, you know, any type of cardio, and like I know the thoughts that I get, right? And I'm sure, like much like anything else, right? Like training your mind, you know, and everything else kind of follows, and it gets easier as you continue to do it. But like, regardless of the distance, I don't want to throw myself out too much. Right. But like, if I'm pushing to get to a certain distance, and like, and I'm already in the internal dialogue is starting, right? And like, that's where my expression of like blown away kind of like comes into play. When you're like 40 miler, I'm like, how many talks did he have with himself? You know, because like, I can only imagine like how much growth comes from that, right? Especially like, I remember early on, like I played a lot of sports growing up, you know, and like cramping early on, right? And cramping like for like, just like a warm up, right? Because I probably ate like shit that day, or whatever the case may be, right? And like, you know, imagine you could cramp up, and I'm not talking about muscles, I'm talking about like your stomach or whatever that is, you know, on mile 17, you know, like that's growth, right? Like pushing through that, like, hey, like knowing like you're not going to die.
Yeah.
This next 2 miles is going to suck as you're working that out, but like, you know, some more power to you, dude, because I just choose not to. But like, that's some serious stuff. Yeah.
Ultra is also just like a big, like pain tolerance sport, I feel like. And I feel like people in recovery are like really good with pain tolerance, because we've all have gone through the ringer. And a lot of times, like if I'm really struggling in a race, like I think back to those first couple months of recovery, and I'm like, running 100 miles right now, but this pain doesn't even come close to like that first couple months, you know? And that's why like you see like a heavy correlation between people that have like experienced like real life suffering, whether it's addiction, getting clean, whether it's trauma, whether it's like, you know, going to war and then PTSD. It's like you see a lot of those same people are at the start line of ultras, and you have some really interesting conversations with people. And
I'm sure. Yeah.
So it's cool. Yeah.
So we're coming up, I believe we're coming up on that, or we passed it. But regardless, we've talked about it at length, right? But like, how have you turned all of your pain that we just got done talking about, like, into this sense of purpose, right? And like, I have my own perception on how you have, right? But I think it's very interesting to hear from you, because there's multiple different avenues that you've kind of like been able to turn this into a purpose,
right?
Or a purposeful, driven life, right? Essentially, that definitely like comes very well off, or well-rounded, I should say. So yeah, very long way for me to ask that question, but how have you turned your pain into a purpose?
I just very complicated question. I feel like I just think that like pain is beautiful, and I think that I choose to chase pain a lot, whether it's in ultra, whether it's in like extreme career, whether it's in like doing something that somebody said I couldn't do, or, you know, sobriety, getting clean, you know, all these things. I just, my perspective on pain as like a word and like an experience has totally changed. I used to be afraid of it. I used to run from it. I used to think it was not good, but ever since that initial like first year of recovery, really coming into myself and molding into my skin and uncovering like who I really was, I realized that like pain is like a necessary part of growth, and pain is, it could be the best thing in your life. Like, even if it doesn't feel like that in the moment, it could be the best thing in your life. And I have that experience, like looking back on my life, when I was just getting clean. It's just like in the moment, I just thought it was never going to end, and I didn't understand the point. But now I have that experience of like, I needed to go through that to get here. And I need to probably go through it again, whether it's another race, whether it's a hard test I have to take, whether it's like, whatever it is, a hard conversation, you know, a controvert, like whatever it is, like I'm probably like, I need to keep going through that in order to get here, in order so my life can look like this. Like, we're not, I don't believe that we're supposed to live in like this happy little world where there's rainbows and butterflies anymore. Like, I just think that like we're meant for struggle. And I think that suffering is important, and suffering should be prioritized. Intentional suffering should be prioritized. And I think if you don't choose to like intentionally suffer, I think you'll unintentionally suffer a lot worse. And that's been my experience. And as a result of kind of following that philosophy and other philosophies, like, you know, prayer and, you know, like we talked about 12-step programs, like I live, you know, a life that I really enjoy living, and I, you know, am happy a lot. And, you know, I wake up with purpose, and I wake up with drive, and I wake up like excited, and I'm around people that are excited. And, you know, I know you can probably relate to like the feeling of like unbelievableness some mornings where you wake up a sober individual and you recollect on your life, and you recollect on all the pain that you've gone through and all the experience that you've had to like trudge through just so that you can make it, sit here, like put together this podcast, like take risks. And like, I just think that pain is like, and uncomfortability and suffering is like all a necessary part of that process. And I think that like, I don't know if this like answers your question directly, but I just think that like chasing those things so that you can continue to grow and self-develop is something that you should prioritize if you don't already.
No, I think it absolutely does answer the question, because the way that I interpreted it was like, pain is not a bad thing, right? And like, when we think of the word pain, right, we think of like something bad, right? We think of like something that happened to us, or something that like, you know, I played no part in, but yet I experienced it. When really, if we shift the perspective, like how I just understood you saying it, was like, I'm making a conscious decision to do this, right? I know it's going to hurt. I know I'm going to be in pain. I know that I'm going to be on like a so much better side of, I'm going to grow so much after this pain, whether it be just discomfort or physical pain or spiritual pain or whatever the pain looks like. It's a very interesting way to look at it. And full disclosure, I'm probably going to look much more into it after like we go our separate ways, because I think that might be the whole name of the game, right? Where it's like, it really might be, right? Because like nothing in my life up until this point that was like really cool or really worth it or whatever the case may be came easy,
right?
You know, it came through either awkward conversations, or like walking through fear, or walking through the anxiety, or sitting at like the table with people that I thought I had no business being at. And like, there's countless situations, right, where it's like, you go into something thinking one thing and it goes completely opposite, right? And now I have that lived experience where it's like I can pass that on to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's a really cool way. I'm really glad that you said that.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to say before we shut it down?
I don't think so. Just, grateful to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Thank you for making the trip.
Yeah, of course.
Now you're not going to Ocean City. You're going back.
Going back up. Got a test I got to study for next week. So,
it's just like medical school. So it's no big deal. But I really appreciate you making the trip, dude.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that we, not only connected, but you stayed on my ass, right? Because I know that like my phone's nuts, right? Like it's just 24/7 all the time.
Right.
But I do appreciate us, this come to fruition and excited for it to come out.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you again.
No problem.
With that, we will see you guys next week.